Hi everyone, I'm Katja, also known as Kat, and today I want to talk to you about my July reading plans, starting with one of my favorite annual reading events, Jane Austen July. I love taking part and deciding what to read for the prompts. If you've never heard of it, well, it's a month-long celebration of all things Jane Austen, hosted by Katie from Books and Things, Marissa from Blatantly Bookish, and Claudia from Spinster's Library. There are reading prompts, watching prompts, group reads, discussions, and generally a lot of Austen enthusiasm across BookTube and other platforms. So I'll leave the hosts' links or announcement videos, links to their announcement videos below, since they're the ones who actually know what they're doing. For me, Jane Austen July arrives at exactly the right time each year, which sounds weird, but I love Austen, but I'm also someone who gets distracted by shiny new books, translated fiction, literary prizes, and whatever random, glorious rabbit hole the Reading the Globe Discord has sent me down that month. So Jane Austen July gives me an excuse mid-year to simplify things and revisit an author I always enjoy. Before I actually get into my reading plans, I thought it would be worth talking a little bit about Jane Austen herself, because while a lot of people have heard of her, not everyone has actually read her. So Jane Austen was born in 1775 and died in 1817 at just 41. A sobering thought as I'm heading towards 47 this year. And while it wasn't an unusually young age to pass away at her time, modern-wise, yes, it is. I say modern-wise, I mean modern perspective-wise. Anyway, in that relatively short life, she wrote 6 completed novels: Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park, Emma, Northanger Abbey, and Persuasion, as well as several shorter works. More than 200 years later, she's still one of the most widely read and adapted authors in the English language. And what's remarkable is that she wasn't writing epic adventures or sweeping historical events. Most of her novels focus on families, friendships, money, marriage, and social expectations, while offering some of the most entertaining character studies in fiction. I think it's that sharp observation of society and people that keeps her stories feeling fresh. She understood how people justify their behavior, how status influences relationships, how money shapes opportunities, and how often people deceive themselves. It also helps that she has a sense of humor. She's really funny. So I think people assume that given the sort of lens that she focuses on, she is not as serious as Dickens or Victor Hugo, purely because we're not going to workhouses or standing on Parisian barricades. But of course, Austen was every bit as interested in power, class, inequality, and social expectations. She simply explored them through drawing rooms, dinner parties, and marriage markets rather than revolutions and extreme poverty, although Mansfield Park does touch on poverty quite a bit more than some of her other novels. In that sense, Austen can also be absolutely savage. Yes, we're attending balls, visiting country estates, and pursuing the advantageous marriages, but Austen was also deeply interested in questions of power, status, and morality, and self-deception. That's one of the reasons I keep returning to her work. Every time I reread Austen at a different stage of life, I notice something new. And while my favorite Austen will always be Persuasion, my second favorite always changes. I often say it's Pride and Prejudice, but these days I would lean towards Mansfield Park because of the subject matter. And that means that it's actually really handy for me to revisit Mansfield Park, which is this year's group read for Jane Austen July. And I can figure out if I do still feel that way, that Mansfield Park is my second. It's an interesting choice because it tends to divide readers. Some people adore it, some find it frustrating, some find the book so frustrating they'd like to shake various members of the Bertram family. Now, personally, I'm very curious to revisit it. Like I said, it's been a few years since I read it. What I remember most is how much it was an a piece of observation, even more so than Pride and Prejudice. And Fanny Price isn't Elizabeth Bennet, and it's not trying to be Pride and Prejudice. I love how obvious Pride and Prejudice is about the absurdity of social conventions. Like the opening line, it is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Or translated into plain English, every parent with an unmarried daughter thinks he ought to be. So Mansfield Park is more subtle. When I first read it as a young teenager, I enjoyed it well enough, but when I reread it a few years later, I started noticing details I'd completely missed the first time around, particularly around the source of the Bertram's wealth and what Austen might be suggesting about privilege, morality, and responsibility. It's possibly Austen's most challenging novel, placing virtue and fortitude at the center of the story, with Fanny Price acting as a moral anchor while everyone around her seems determined to make increasingly questionable decisions. And I suspect I'll appreciate it even more now than when I last read it. So I'm thrilled that it's a group read. Now, for the prompt to read one of Austen's 6 major novels, I'm keeping things simple because I need balance. I could have gone with Persuasion or Sense and Sensibility, both of which are worth a revisit. And Emma as well, Northanger Abbey, yeah. Still, instead, I'm just doubling up and I'm going to count Mansfield Park for both. It keeps things a lot easier for me this month. Now, for the next one, which is to read one of her not 6 major works, I'm going with Lady Susan, a book I love, and also it's short, it's a novella. And also the film adaptation was brilliant with Kate Beckinsale, although it's titled differently, it's Love and Friendship there. If you've never read Lady Susan, it's very different from Austen's published novels. It's sharper, more cynical, and considerably more scandalous. Lady Susan herself is one of the most entertaining, manipulative characters Austen ever created. She is superficially charming, intelligent, selfish, ruthless, and endlessly fascinating. For the non-fiction prompt, I'm planning to read Jane Austen's Bookshelf by Rebecca Romney, and that is really because of Katie from Books and Things recommendation. She mentioned it in her Jane Austen July announcement, and I immediately thought, yes, that's exactly the sort of book that I would enjoy. The book examines the women writers who influenced Austen and asks why so many of them have faded from public memory while Austen became one of the most celebrated authors in English literature. And if you've watched my channel for any length of time, you'll know that's very much in my wheelhouse because one of the things I'm fascinated about and I love most about translated fiction, small presses, and projects like Reading the Globe is discovering voices that have been overlooked, forgotten, and pushed to the margins of the literary conversation. So I've heard lots of excellent things about it, and I suspect it will send me down some literary rabbit holes, which is both exciting and slightly dangerous. For the retelling or Austen-inspired prompt, I have several possibilities, but I suspect I'm not going anywhere with them. I could reread The Other Bennet Sister, and can you believe that my recommendation to you all for this book is 5 years old? And then I ended up not watching the TV adaptation, which everyone's raving about or had been raving about a couple of months ago. So yeah, I can't believe how time flies. And perhaps rather than me actually rereading the book, I will finally get round to watching the TV adaptation. But if you have any recommendations for excellent Austen retellings, do let me know in the comments. For the prompt to read a book by a contemporary of Jane Austen, something published during Austen's lifetime, I'm considering Evelina by Frances Burney. And this prompt is probably the least settled since I'm also in the middle of coursework at the moment, so we'll see how far my reading mood and brain bandwidth will take me. So speaking off balance, many of you know that I struggled with posting consistently last year and the beginning of this year because of medication issues and including facial swelling, various side effects from having stage 4 endometriosis. But one of the interesting things that has happened in the past year is that I started a faceless channel that was focused on, or is focused on, fountain pens, stationery, and journaling, and creating content over there brought me relief because it was a creative outlet when I couldn't face the camera. So it was just, like the camera down on my hands and on the pens and on the stationery, and it's just been monetized. So I might share with you, if you're interested in stationery channels, I might share the title with you. Let me know in the comments, and then I can always do a reveal video at some point. But at this stage, what I'm trying to find is that healthy balance again, where I can keep making content for both channels, because I love BookTube and I like the stationery channel as well. So ideally, I'm thinking weekly or bi-weekly, and that shouldn't stretch me too thin, especially now that I'm feeling a lot better and have managed to calm down a lot of symptoms. Now, the desire for balance actually influences my approach to the next prompt, which is watching a direct screen adaptation of Jane Austen's novel. I was tempted to rewatch the 1995 Pride and Prejudice adaptation because it's excellent. But I'm going to skip this prompt because one of my goals right now is to reduce my screen time. Instead, I'll save that screen time for the prompt to watch something connected to Jane Austen that isn't a direct adaptation. I'm planning to watch Lucy Worsley's documentary Behind Closed Doors, which the host selected as this year's group watch. So despite the reduced screen time this year, there are 2 upcoming Austen-related adaptations that I can watch later on, perhaps drip feeding into my dedicated screen time. And I'm hoping they're better than the 2022 Persuasion adaptation. First, we have the new Sense and Sensibility film arriving at the end of September. Then later this autumn, we have the Netflix's 6-part adaptation of Pride and Prejudice written by Dolly Parton. I'm cautiously optimistic about both. Now for July's non-Austen reading. My co-hosts, the Reading the Globe members, and I are returning to the classic strand with Men of Maize by Miguel Angel Asturias. Originally published in 1949, it's a landmark Guatemalan novel that helped establish Asturias as one of Latin America's most important literary voices and later contributed to him receiving the Nobel Prize in Literature. The novel blends mythology, politics, and indigenous traditions and is often described as a foundational work of magical realism. It explores the devastating impact of commercial exploitation on Maya communities and their relationship with the land. It sounds challenging, ambitious, and exactly the kind of book Reading the Globe encourages me to pick up. And on 5th July, Jack from Spread Bookjoy and I will be going live to discuss the young adult translated novel. This month, it is The Murderer's Ape by Jakob Begelis, which has been an absolute delight to read. I'm also using July to finalize my plans for Women in Translation Month in August. Myself, Roz from Scallydandling About the Books, and Angelia from Read and Reread recently announced our group read, and the winner of the poll was The Door by Magda Szabo, receiving 41% of the vote. I've read wonderful things about this novel, and I'm really looking forward to it. We also have 4 prompts for Women in Translation Month, and we'll be sharing recommendations and our own reading plans throughout this month of July. So July is shaping up to be a wonderfully bookish month. I'd love to know if you're taking part in Jane Austen July this year. What are you planning to read? Are you joining Reading the Globe in July, Women in Translation Month in August, or perhaps both? And while we're talking Austen, which of her novels is your favorite? I'd love to know. So that's actually it. I had a quick look at my notes. I was like, oh, what am I talking about next? But that's it. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.